انت هتوديني السجن شكلك بس يلا. بدأت أعرك.
Nuit sans fin.
Good to
How
see
are
you,
you,
my
brother?
brother.
It's so good to see
Finally.
you. Finally doing this, man. I am with Omar Basaad, my very good friend. Welcome to the interview series.
Glad to be here, bro.
#1 DJ in Saudi Arabia. First Saudi to play Tomorrowland, just at Middle Beast, backstage, and we're friends, so I'm getting to hang out with one of my friends. So let's start at the very beginning, which is where you're from and what that world looks like. I don't think a lot of people understand what it means to be from Saudi Arabia, and especially Jeddah. I think there's so much there that's different than what you'll hear in public relations for Riyadh or what's going on in Aramco. It's its own world. So I want you to tell me, how has Jeddah kind of changed over the last 10 or 20 years, especially as it pertains to music?
I mean, look, it's not only Jeddah. I know, like, you've been to Jeddah. We did your listening party there. It was amazing. The thing is, in Saudi, you're saying like Hijaz. Saudi's so big. Like there's Jeddah, Medina, Riyadh, and they all act, in solo. They have their own entertainment concerts, Riyadh season, Jeddah season, and a lot of things going around. But being from Jeddah, me and Coach, I grew up with different, artists there. People trying to do R&B, hip hop back in the days. There's a lot of people trying to venture into it. The DJing scene, it started to grow. When you see the trajectory of what's happening, not only in Jeddah and Riyadh, especially the past 5, 6, 7 years, when the entertainment industry started to boom in Saudi with the 2030 vision, I think everyone that started to do music, they started being the scene because of the opportunities that's there from the entertainment. And that's creating a creative economy as we speak, not only for artists, not only for venues or entertainment lovers, for everyone. And that's the new thing, that's what's happening in Saudi. And especially, not only Jeddah, like I said, everywhere else.
Interesting. You're the first Saudi I've actually interviewed on this series. You know what I want to ask you is, I have a lot of listeners from outside of Saudi Arabia and a lot of people who've never been to Saudi Arabia, never even thought of going to Saudi Arabia. And there's a lot of stereotypes and there's a lot of misconceptions. I know some of them because I've been in and out of Saudi Arabia. I have a fan base there. So do you. So let me ask you a question. As a guy who's been, we're in Miami right now, and you've been to Miami 10 plus times, coming to Ultra and different music festivals. You've also been to Los Angeles. You've been all over the place, and London and Dubai, and now, you're based in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, but you have a lot of stuff going on in Riyadh. So you kind of span the globe in terms of where you've been and the people you're friends with, and so you understand the different perspectives. Right?
Well, that guy was crazy.
Yes. So I want you to tell me, assuming I'm a person who's never been to Saudi Arabia, and I've just heard stories, there's a lot of misconceptions. Can you try and just briefly explain what it's like in Saudi Arabia as it compares to the United States or as it compares to Dubai? How is it different?
If you want to compare, Saudi's too safe. It's extremely the safest country maybe in the world. You put your car there, it's not going to get stolen easily. You lose something, people are going to help you. You don't have cash and you lost your wallet, people are going to literally go out for you, open their houses for you. That's Saudi. Culturally, we like, to give hospitality to people, show them our way of doing things. And I think so, when you say compare the States and here, it's a different, two different countries. These have their own, things that are going on, and we have our own thing going on. So I think so. The misconception is not by the people. It's more like, come and visit to Saudi, and we'll show you what a Saudi is.
What would you say to people who are afraid to come to Saudi? Because there's a lot of these kind of. I'll tell you. I've spent a lot of time in the U.S. I have a lot of friends in the U.S. The first thing that they say when I say, "Oh, I was just in Saudi Arabia for whatever," they say, "Damn, bro, for real? Isn't that scary? I heard people get their hands cut off. I heard people get their necks chopped off."
That's not true.
Yeah, why don't you take a moment to address those myths?
I mean, that's not true. Whoever goes to Saudi Cristiano Ronaldo is there, Neymar is there. A lot of the biggest football players are there, and the celebrities. We have the Red Sea Film Festival, concerts. I think so. That's misconception is go solo to the person not doing their own research and going to Saudi and visiting Saudi.
Right. Definitely nothing like that there. There's a lot of misconceptions, but really it could be a really wonderful place. So now let me ask you a question. You've been in the music game for years. I've been in the music game for years. We've seen artists come and go, come into the industry, leave the industry. They have these kind of meteoric rises and then they fall off. You know, it's really, I mean, longevity is really the hardest thing in this industry. So let me ask you a question. Why, and I ask this to pretty much everyone who comes on here, you know, where is the music industry right now in terms of its development process in the Middle East? This is what I always say on here. We have Adele from the UK, we have BTS from Korea, we have J Balvin from Colombia, Shakira from Colombia. I can pretty much name Toronto, Drake, Canada, Weeknd, Justin Bieber. Like every kind of region of the world has its globally recognized superstar. Asia has it, you know, UK, whatever. My question is, why don't we have a globally recognized superstar from the Middle East?
I think you're correct. Like the next stop is from the Middle East.
You think that's next?
Yeah, I think that's next. But
I like that.
I think a lot of people have been testing a lot of songs to push that, you know, being different. Maybe, you know, I'm a piano in Arabic, which I'm hearing a lot in the scene. People want to push that to be the first global recognition. We are on that phase because if you want to see the Saudi scene, it's diverse. The Egyptian scene is diverse, the Moroccan. You have a lot of great artists, but who will be that artist, we don't know. The work is just going to continue. In terms of development in Saudi, there's a lot of things that have been set, like I told you, like they're giving opportunities to artists to perform in small or big venues or even open up for big artists. The Music Commission is starting to work very much putting certain, you know, elements to make this perfect and make everyone educated in music and actually become something big. Now, you know what the Swedes have. They always have hits, the Swedish producer.
Of course, yeah.
And that was so interesting for me because every Swedish almost person I know, they play way better piano than me. And they're not even musicians. That thing is in their system, in the schooling system, to teach them to be like an artist, whatever it is, you know, not only music, but music is the base. That's why you have your Max Martins, Stargates, and all that. And I think, and I don't know if this is true, but we're going in that direction, you know, putting in the schools, the music, starting to develop the scene. Maybe in 10, 20 years time, we'll have a different, you know, producers of Saudi. But I think the next wave is from the Middle East and North Africa for sure.
That's big, and I hope it's true. I think it's underrepresented, but there's a lot of talent. The last question I kind of want to ask you about the industry, you know, again, like you and I have worked with a lot of similar artists. We have friends or acquaintances who are in the music scene. I always wanted to ask this question is, what do you think artists could be doing better? From this region, I'm talking about specifically the GCC, right? I think Egypt has some momentum with what they're doing. Morocco has some momentum. And there's different little pockets of things bubbling up. But I feel like the GCC is still probably the earliest in its development compared to the other sub-regions of the Arab world. So what do you think, you know, definitely part of it is infrastructure. But because things have become democratized and everyone can access Instagram the same way and everyone can post the same videos on YouTube and whatever, the real question is, well, then what is the artist doing that's not working? So what do you think could be improved from the artist's formula, especially when we're talking about in the GCC, that would be more conducive to success in the region?
Look, what is artistry? That's the question, because every artist has their own goal and they should stick to it. But when you talk about what they could do, and you know this very well, consistency, advertising, and actually not making people bored, but just posting random things every day. And I don't think so that's there. I'm seeing like 1 or 2 or 3 tracks a year from artists. That's very good artists too, you know, but it's not hitting that wavelength. And you probably know that better than me when we once talked about, you know, how certain promotion needs to be there. People could see you as an awareness maybe, you know what I mean? And I think so that part of the business is still missing, or that part of certain artists not want to get into marketing and pushing things digitally is missing. And I see that as a huge gap because they could scale up very quickly.
Makes sense. So you're saying it's from the angle of public relations and how you present yourself to your fan base, how you present yourself to the public.
Exactly.
That's the weak spot.
Exactly.
Not the music.
Not the music. In terms of music is all about taste.
Right.
You know,
it's subjective.
Exactly. So we can't tap into that. But, you know, it's a numbers game too. So that's a difference.
Okay, let's switch gears now and start talking about you as an artist. I want to know, you know, when we say the #1 DJ in Saudi Arabia.
You said that.
I said that.
Yeah.
And I stand by that. And
why do you stand by that? So let's talk about that. I want to know, what is your metrics, you know?
The numbers don't lie, brother.
Numbers.
If we're talking about which DJ has played the biggest shows internationally, it's you. If we're talking about which DJ has the biggest fan base streaming-wise from Saudi Arabia, it's you. I mean, there's no competition here. So I don't think there's even worth discussing.
I don't like to be labeled, but all right.
Hey, you're not doing it. I'm doing it for you. Okay, so shifting the focus now to you and your own artist career. This is really interesting because if you're coming from Saudi Arabia has undergone an incredible evolution over the last, I want to say 10 to 15 years, especially with MBS. I mean, it's accelerated the amount of, it's how much the country has opened up to, you know, outside travel, commerce, and even the laws have been changing rapidly and becoming a little bit more modernized and more global friendly. So, but you started your music career before any of that started. You started when it was the hardest to begin and where you could have gotten in a lot of trouble at the time for, you know, if you didn't play your cards right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You had to be very selective and very careful with how you played your cards because the rules then were very different. So I want you to take me into that journey with you from the beginning. How did you get into DJing? What were the risks you took? What could have gone wrong? And how did you eventually become where you are now?
Look, since I was a kid, I always loved music. So that something was in the soul. When I was 13, 14, I got the guitar, I bought a guitar, and I started to play the first 3 notes of Nothing Else Matters because it's easy. You don't need to, like, you know, hold any chords. And then I realized that I really love also, you know, the part where you could get in tech and make the music easily and faster. That I was always interested about that. So I started, you know, to research about the softwares, and I kept the guitar on the right, you know, it's hanging there, it's chilling. And then I went to venturing into music alone, you know, in the beginning. Starting doing beats, research, you know, we had the CDs, having some samples and all that. And then I started to actually get a bit of traction when I was 17, which I signed my first remix deal with a Turkish pop star named Starkan. And Tiesto was also in the album. That was my first, you know, actually, hey, take this money and, you know, I want to hear your remix kind of vibes. From there, I went to the UK, you know, I studied a bit. I was still doing music on the side. And from there, I started to actually grow into getting, you know, bookings in Dubai. And I moved to Dubai. I worked in radio for almost like 10 years as a presenter, 4 years as a full-time. You know, I've been in very different eras, you know, from the past to the present. But coming back to your question, saying, you know, how it was different and laws, music was always there in Saudi. That's the one thing people don't see it. There's cassette shops everywhere, you know, that sells music back in the day in Saudi. The Arabic pop stars, they used to perform in Saudi, but the rules were just different. Maybe the EDM or the dance scene or the R&B scene wasn't as much as popular. Maybe that's why there was no traction. I think so that's the misconception, you know, of seeing things. I don't know how you view things on that. For me, I was always in the bedroom working on music. Yeah. I was always researching, trying to find out studios in the UK or somewhere. Whenever I travel, I try to meet artists. That was my journey, you know? And here and there, meeting, you know, great people that help you, or great people could backstab you, you know? That's a lot. But it's a learning curve, you know? Putting a thicker skin on the game and taking those experiences, converting into either melodies or, you know, an idea. And you do that a lot with your music, and I've seen it. You get inspired, you know, you write about stuff. And that's pretty much the journey, you know. In betweens, you have my Tomorrowland, you know, the first one I played, that was like a big moment for me in my life. 2014 MTV EMAs, the only Saudi DJ producer got nominated in that category, which I didn't win.
When you talk about cassette shops, right? Let's go back. That's very interesting. So there's a misconception that there's no music in Saudi, but there really was music in Saudi the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. There's a huge art scene, not only, like, I'm not talking music only, there's a huge art scene, and you've seen it in Riyadh, and we're very well invested in this. Yeah. So it's not nothing new.
You know, you talked about how you started and, you know, eventually went to Dubai for a bit, you were working in radio. What was your experience like working in radio and also being a DJ? You know, these were during the years that the region was really just starting to pick up to get to where the momentum it is now. So can you tell me what it was like at the time working in that kind of field during that time?
Look, working in media was a different experience for me. Radio is different. You need to have taste. You need to be presentable, you need to do content for on air. I was juggling between the both worlds. And after I finished work, I used to go produce music for myself. Like sometimes I used to have shows. I had a show once. I went to Singapore just for the weekend and come back to go 8 to 5, you know, on radio, or 8 to 8, whatever the day is. And the radio gave me an experience understanding the listenerships in Saudi, because I was working on the top 2 biggest radio stations in Saudi as a group. And that gave me an incentive understanding what kind of behaviors there are in the scene for a very long time. Because my show, one of my shows was long-lasting show called Chat Zone. We had Ed Sheerans, we had Rita Ora's, and we were always talking about Saudi and, you know, going on an exclusive songs expedition for them to promote it on our show. And for me, that experience did convey on how I actually understand the listenerships, not on Spotify back in the days, not on data to run. That was for me a live data. You know what people are listening, there's certain behaviors, there's research obviously, but that gave me a different, you know, incentive to work on music and juggling between the both lives. It was tough because I got nominated while I was working from 8 to 5 on FTV MAs. I got my first Greenfield show when I was working 8 to 5. You know, I got some other big festivals that I played also. They're always 8 to 5. I always love to work. That's my thing.
So we're talking about Ed Sheeran, Rita Ora, and basically you were playing a role in, as you were saying, like you were basically getting the Western exposure to Saudi Arabia and vice versa, getting Saudi Arabia more kind of aware of the global trends in music at the same time by playing a role in radio. That's basically what you're saying. Okay. So what made you decide, I remember I met you before you stopped working in radio. What played a role in that transition out of radio and into your new kind of areas you're in now?
My first 4.5, 5 years, I had a certain role in the radio. It wasn't only doing the show. Started off working as a production producer and handling certain tasks, including the radio show and music, which was like a lot of things. They're all different. But it came to a certain time where I started to get creative projects as a creative director, not only it was in music space, but also in ideations, which I always loved, you know. And I started to, you know, getting a big projects. I left the whole production part of the radio, but I continued the show for another couple of years, you know, outside of the building. And I think so when I saw the opportunity to do things for music or do things creatively as a creative director, that changed, you know, my whole perspective of doing things. Doesn't mean that 9 to 5 is wrong. No, it's just like a different, you know, entrepreneurship for me and venturing into new things.
So you got more of an appetite for risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, just recently it's led you to performing at Middle East.
Yeah.
Which is the largest festival in Saudi Arabia. How many attendees this year were there? 100 and something thousand, I believe.
Maybe more, but they broke the Tomorrowland record last year.
They broke the Tomorrowland record. Okay, that's incredible. That's incredible. So you were there performing.
Yeah.
You know, when you reflect back on your career now, from the moment you started with the guitar, 12, 13, all the way to now being basically performing in front of the biggest festival, you know, in EDM this year, basically. What's your biggest takeaway from the whole experience? What's your biggest piece of advice? If you met a young Omar Basaad today, and you were talking to a young Omar Basaad, what would you tell him?
You made it. That's it.
What advice would you give him?
You made no advice. Because this journey made me who I am. If I would give an advice, I would be taking a different route. And I think that what makes the journey very important. Regardless, you might not like it, you might have bad days, bad years. It's the journey what makes you who you are as an artist or as an entrepreneur or as a businessman or as a friend, anything. And this question, really, imagine you could go back to your own self and give advice. I think so, you might actually fail.
Well, that in itself is some good advice, yeah. Okay, well, thanks for coming, man. It was really good talking to you. What is, before we wrap this up, I always like to ask a question, which is, right now we're December 31st, we're the last day of 2023. So this might air in 2024, but this is the New Year's Eve of 2023. We just wrapped up another shoot, and we're now wrapping up this last podcast of the year, and we're about to go into a new year, right? And I always like to ask this question, which is, I think time is the most valuable asset that we have as people. It's more important than money. You can trade it for money, and you can trade it for a lot of other things, and you can never get it back. Once it's gone, it's gone. So my question for you is, how do you make the most of your time?
This year, you're working on a lot of things, and that's going to be a very different direction, lyrically, musically. And I think so that will push some envelopes for us. And I know that, and that's just the beginning. Other than that, honestly, I want to start venturing into tech space, with you on, it's going to be interesting though, yeah. And I want to start creating more immersive experiences like I do with Coexist, my company.
Well, we're going to do another episode in a few months, and we'll follow up with you on that idea and see how far you've taken it. Otherwise, man, Happy New Year's. And thank you so much for coming.
My brother.
So good to see you, bro.
Take it easy, man.
Yeah.
In the kitchen on the floor, babe.